The crystal towers of Zephyria Prime shimmered weakly under the dying light of their ancient sun. What had once been a brilliant golden star now flickered like a candle in the wind, casting pale shadows across the beautiful city below. Elder Hana pressed her four-fingered hand against the smooth crystal wall of the highest tower. Her translucent skin, which had always caught and reflected light in dancing patterns, now looked dull in the fading starlight. She could feel the vibrations through the crystal as another atmospheric storm shook their world. "The storms are getting worse," said Counselor Yuna as she joined Hana on the observation platform. Her voice carried the musical quality that all Zephyrians possessed, but it trembled with worry. The atmospheric processors can barely keep up with the pressure changes. Below them, the crystal city stretched out like a garden of living glass. The Zephyrians had built their civilization from the singing crystals that grew naturally on their world. Each building hummed with soft melodies that changed with the light and weather. But now, many of the crystal structures showed dark cracks running through them like scars. "How long do we have?" Hana asked quietly. Yuna looked up at their dying sun. "The stellar engineers say perhaps 3 months before the final collapse, maybe less. 3 months. Hana closed her eyes and tried to remember when their sun had been strong and bright. She had lived for over 200 years, considered young by Zephyrian standards, but even the eldest among them could remember when their star had begun to weaken. "Have the other worlds responded to our requests?" Hana asked, though she already knew the answer from Yuna's expression. "The Galactic Trade Federation says we are too far from the main shipping routes," Yuna replied bitterly. "The Centauri Alliance claims they do not have the resources to evacuate an entire species. The Andromedan Republic." She paused and shook her head. "They simply stopped answering our messages." Hana felt a familiar ache in her chest. The Zephyrians had always been peaceful. They created art and music, studied mathematics and philosophy, but they had never developed the technologies of war or rapid space travel. Their ships were beautiful but slow, designed for contemplation rather than escape. "We are not warriors," Hana whispered. "We are not traders or conquerors. We are simply singers in crystal towers, and the universe has no use for us." A young Zephyrian named Kiro climbed the spiral staircase to join them. His skin still held some of the bright patterns of youth, but even he looked tired. "Elder Hana, the children are asking when we will leave for the new world." Hana and Yuna exchanged glances. There was no new world. No one was coming to save them. "Tell them we are still making preparations," Hana said gently. "Ask them to practice their harmony songs. We may need them soon." Kiro nodded and descended the stairs, his footsteps echoing through the crystal tower. When he was gone, Yuna turned to Hana with tears in her large, dark eyes. "We cannot tell them the truth," Yuna said, "that we will die here with our world." "Perhaps we should not think of it as dying," Hana replied slowly. "Perhaps we should think of it as completing our song." That evening, as their weak sun set behind the crystal spires, Hana called for a gathering in the great resonance chamber. Thousands of Zephyrians came, their translucent forms filling the enormous crystal hall that had been carved from a single massive singing stone. The chamber had been built to amplify their voices, to send their songs across great distances. In the old days, they had used it to communicate with Zephyrian settlements on other continents. Now, Hana had a different purpose in mind. "My people," Hana began, her voice carrying clearly through the crystal walls. "We have asked the galaxy for help, and the galaxy has chosen not to hear us. We are too few, too far, too different for them to care." A murmur of sadness rippled through the crowd. "But we are not silent," Hana continued, her voice growing stronger. "We are singers. We are the children of crystal and light. If we must face the darkness, we will face it with song." She raised her hand, and slowly, the Zephyrians began to sing. Their voices blended in mathematical harmonies that had been passed down for thousands of years. The crystal chamber caught their song and amplified it, sending it out through the dying atmosphere of their world. But this was not just any song. This was a prayer, a plea, a message sent into the vast emptiness of space. They sang of their crystal cities and their love for beauty. They sang of their peaceful ways and their acceptance of fate. They sang of their hope that somewhere, someone, might hear them and remember that they had existed. The song grew stronger as more voices joined in. The crystals throughout the city began to resonate, picking up the harmony and broadcasting it into space on frequencies that could travel between the stars. They sang through the night as their sun flickered above them. They sang as the atmospheric storms raged around their crystal towers. They sang as their world slowly died beneath their feet. They sang because it was all they had left to do. And in the vast darkness of space, their song traveled outward like ripples on a cosmic pond, carrying their prayer to anyone who might be listening. The Zephyrians did not know if anyone would hear them. They did not know if anyone would care, but they sang anyway, because sometimes in the infinite darkness, the only thing left to do is make a beautiful sound and hope that someone, somewhere, will answer. Lieutenant Minho stretched in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. The night shift aboard the exploration vessel Harmony was always quiet, but tonight felt especially long. Around him, the communication equipment hummed softly as it scanned the empty regions of space, looking for anything unusual. Most nights, there was nothing. Just the background noise of distant stars and the occasional automated beacon from old mining stations. Minho had been doing this job for 3 years, and he had learned not to expect excitement. He was reaching for his coffee cup when the speakers crackled with something different. At first, it sounded like static, but as Minho adjusted the filters, he realized it was something else entirely. It was almost like music. "That's strange," he muttered to himself, leaning forward to study the readouts. The signal was coming from a region of space that had never been explored by humans. It was far beyond the normal trade routes in a part of the galaxy that most people considered empty and worthless. But this signal was definitely artificial. It had patterns, mathematical structures that no natural phenomenon could create. Minho recorded the transmission and began running it through the ship's translation computers. "Bridge, this is communications," he said into his headset. "I'm picking up something unusual. You might want to take a look at this." Within minutes, Captain Daehyun arrived in the communications room, still wearing his sleep clothes but fully alert. Behind him came Dr. Yoonji, the ship's xenobiologist, and Lieutenant Gina from the navigation station. "Play it again," Captain Daehyun ordered. Minho played the signal through the speakers. The strange musical patterns filled the room, rising and falling in complex harmonies that somehow seemed both alien and beautiful. "It's not random, Doctor," Hyunji said, studying the computer analysis. "Look at these mathematical structures. This is language, but it's also music. Whoever is sending this thinks in numbers and songs at the same time." "Can we translate it?" the captain asked. "The computer is working on it now," Minho replied, "but it's going to take time. This is unlike anything in our databases." They waited as the translation programs ran their calculations. The signal kept repeating, the same beautiful patterns over and over again. There was something desperate about the repetition, like someone calling for help in the darkness. Finally, the computer finished its analysis. Text began scrolling across Minho's screen, and as he read it, his expression changed from curiosity to shock. "Captain," he said quietly, "you need to see this." The translated message was poetry, but it was also a plea for help. The senders called themselves Zephyrians, and they were dying. Their star was collapsing, their world was ending, and they had nowhere to go. They had asked other civilizations for help, but no one had answered. "They're praying," Dr. Yoonji whispered, reading over Minho's shoulder. "They're sending their prayers into space, hoping someone will hear them." The message described their crystal cities, their peaceful culture, their love of music and mathematics. It spoke of children who would never grow up to see the stars, of ancient songs that would be lost forever, of a civilization that would disappear without a trace. "How far away are they?" Captain Daehyun asked. Lieutenant Gina consulted her star charts. "Very far, sir. It would take us at least 2 weeks to reach their system, even at maximum speed." And that's assuming we could get authorization from Terran Command. Authorization? Dr. Yunji looked up sharply. Captain, these people are facing extinction. We have to help them. Captain Dae-hyun was quiet for a long moment, reading the translated prayers that kept scrolling across the screen. He thought about his own childhood on Earth, about the stories his grandmother had told him of humanity's dark periods, when they had felt alone and forgotten in the universe. Minho, send a message to Terran Command, he said finally. Request authorization for a rescue mission to the Zephyrian system. Sir, with respect, Lieutenant Gina said carefully. Command is going to ask about resources, cost, strategic value. These Zephyrians are unknown. They're far from our territory, and they don't seem to have anything we need. They have something we need, the captain replied firmly. They have the right to exist. The response from Terran Command came 12 hours later. As Lieutenant Gina had predicted, it was not encouraging. The Zephyrian system was too far from human space. The species was unknown and potentially dangerous, and the resources required for a rescue mission could not be justified. File denied. Minho read from the official message. No authorization for rescue mission. Continue standard patrol duties. Dr. Yunji slammed her hand on the desk. They're going to let an entire civilization die because it's inconvenient to save them? Captain Dae-hyun stood quietly by the viewing port, looking out at the stars. The Zephyrian signal was still coming through the speakers, still repeating. Its beautiful, desperate prayer. Minho, he said without turning around. Send a message to the Colonial Alliance, the Independent Traders Union, and any civilian vessels in this sector. Tell them about the Zephyrians. Tell them what we found. Sir, that's not following proper channels, Lieutenant Gina warned. Sometimes, proper channels lead to the wrong place, the captain replied. He turned to face his crew. I've made my decision. We're going to help them. If Terran Command won't authorize a rescue mission, we'll organize one ourselves. Over the next few days, responses began coming in from across human space. Ship captains who had read about the Zephyrians and wanted to help. Civilian vessels willing to carry refugees. Military officers who were ready to volunteer their leave time for a rescue mission. It's working, Minho reported excitedly. We have 12 ships confirmed, with more joining every day. Dr. Yunji smiled as she listened to the Zephyrian prayers still echoing through the communication system. They asked the universe for help, she said softly. They just didn't know the universe would answer in human voices. The human rescue fleet moved through the darkness of space like a collection of fireflies against the vast emptiness. 12 ships of different sizes and shapes had come together for this mission. Military vessels with sleek hulls, bulky cargo ships converted to carry refugees, and even a few civilian pleasure craft whose owners had volunteered to help. Captain, Dae-hyun stood on the bridge of the Harmony, watching the other ships maintain formation around them. Each vessel had come from a different part of human space, but they all shared the same purpose. They had all heard the Zephyrian prayers and decided to answer. Navigation report, he called to Lieutenant Gina. We're making good time, sir, she replied, studying her star charts. But we're entering uncharted space now. No human ship has been this far out before. Behind them, Communications Officer Minho was still monitoring the Zephyrian signal. The prayers had become weaker over the past few days, and sometimes they stopped completely for hours at a time. Their transmission is getting fainter, Minho reported with worry. Either their equipment is failing or... He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what the alternative was. Dr. Yunji was working with the refugee ships, helping them prepare for the Zephyrians they hoped to rescue. The cargo holds had been converted into temporary living spaces, with life support systems adjusted for alien physiology based on the limited information they had. We don't even know if they can breathe our air. One of the civilian captains had worried during their last communication meeting. Then we'll figure it out when we get there, Dr. Yunji had replied firmly. We'll make it work. On Zephyria Prime, the situation was getting desperate. Elder Hana led her people deeper into the underground crystal chambers as the surface storms became too dangerous. The beautiful crystal cities that had stood for thousands of years were cracking and falling as their dying sun's death throes affected the planet's gravity and atmosphere. The prayer transmitters are failing, young Kiro reported to the elder. The surface equipment cannot withstand the storms much longer. Hana nodded sadly. They had been broadcasting their prayers for weeks now, sending their songs into the void, with no response. Perhaps it was time to accept that no one was listening after all. Continue the prayers as long as we can, she told him. If we must sing our final song, let it be a beautiful one. The human fleet was still 3 days away when they encountered their first obstacle. Warning signals suddenly filled the communication. Channels and 12 alien warships appeared on their sensors, moving to block their path. Unknown vessels, came a harsh voice speaking broken standard. You are entering hegemony space. Turn back immediately. Captain Daehyun recognized the ships from intelligence briefings, sector vessels belonging to a military alliance known for their aggression and territorial behavior. The sector were not evil, but they believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. This is Captain Daehyun of the Terran vessel Harmony, he replied calmly. We are on a humanitarian mission to assist a dying species. We mean no harm to hegemony territory. Humanitarian? The sector commander's voice carried confusion and contempt. You risk your lives for strangers? This makes no sense. Turn back, or we will force you to turn back. Dr. Yunji looked at the tactical display showing the enemy ships. They have us outnumbered, Captain, and their ships are built for war. So are some of ours, replied Commander Seojin from the military escort, vessel defender. Captain, request permission to engage if they attack. Daehyun studied the situation. The sector ships were faster and more heavily armed, but they seemed genuinely confused by the human mission. In their culture, no one risked their lives for strangers without expecting something in return. All ships, maintain course, Daehyun ordered. Do not fire unless fired upon, but do not stop. The two fleets approached each other slowly. The tension was thick as both sides prepared for battle. The sector had never encountered a species that would fight for others without personal gain, and they didn't know how to respond. The first shots came from a nervous sector gunner who fired on one of the civilian rescue ships. Immediately, the defender and 2 other military vessels moved to protect the civilians, returning fire with precise shots that disabled the attacking ship without destroying it. Why do you protect the weak ones? The sector commander demanded over the communication channel. They contribute nothing to your battle strength. Because they're here to help save lives, Captain Daehyun replied, and because no one should face danger alone. The battle was brief but intense. The humans fought not like conquerors but like protectors. They used their ships to shield the civilian vessels. They rescued sector crew members from damaged ships, and they showed mercy to enemies who expected none. This confused the sector so much that they began to make tactical mistakes. They couldn't understand an enemy that would sacrifice military advantage to save civilians, even enemy civilians. Finally, the sector commander called for a ceasefire. We do not understand you humans, he said, but you fight for something we do not comprehend. We will not stop you. Perhaps the universe needs more strange warriors like you. As the sector fleet withdrew, Dr. Yunji received an update from Minho. The Zephyrian signal is getting stronger again, he reported. I think we're getting closer. How much time do we have? Captain Daehyun asked. Lieutenant Gina checked her calculations. Based on the stellar data we're receiving, their sun could go nova anytime now. We have maybe 2 days, possibly less. The rescue fleet increased speed, pushing their engines to the limit as they raced against time and physics to reach a dying world where an entire civilization waited for an answer to their prayers. Elder Hana felt the ground shake beneath her feet as another massive storm swept across the surface of Zephyria Prime. The underground crystal chambers where her people had taken shelter hummed with worried voices and the sound of cracking stone. Their beautiful world was dying, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The surface transmitters have failed completely, Counselor Yuna reported, her translucent skin dim with exhaustion. We can no longer send our prayers to the stars. Hana, nodded sadly. Perhaps it was for the best. They had been calling into the void for weeks with no answer. It was time to accept their fate with dignity. Young Kiro came running through the crystal tunnels, his eyes wide with excitement. "Elder Hana, you must come to the surface. There are lights in the sky." "The aurora storms have been getting stronger," Hana replied gently. "The dying sun creates many strange lights." "No," Kiro insisted, grabbing her arm. "These are different. They move like ships." Hana exchanged glances with Yuna. It could be atmospheric phenomena, or perhaps Kiro's young mind was creating hope where none existed. But something in his voice made her follow him through the winding crystal passages toward the surface. When they emerged from the underground chambers, Hana stopped in amazement. Above them, through the thin, storm-torn atmosphere, she could see moving lights, not the random flashing of aurora, but organized patterns that moved with purpose across the sky. "Ships," she whispered. "But whose ships?" Then the communication equipment in the nearby shelter crackled to life. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything Hana had ever heard, rough and alien but somehow warm. "Zephyrian people, this is Captain Daehyun of the human vessel Harmony. We have received your prayers. We are here to help." Hana's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Yuna caught her arm as tears began flowing down the elder's face. "Humans?" Yuna whispered. "We have never heard of humans." The alien voice continued, and Hana was amazed to hear him speaking in mathematical patterns that resembled Zephyrian prayer songs. "We know your son is dying. We have come to take you to safety. Please, respond if you can hear this message." With trembling hands, Hana activated the communication device. This is Elder Hana of the Zephyrian people. You came? You actually came?" "We heard your songs," the human captain replied. "They were beautiful. No one should have to sing alone in the darkness." Over the next few hours, the human ships began landing on Zephyria Prime. Elder Hana watched in wonder as the first shuttle touched down near their shelter. The beings that emerged were strange, shorter than Zephyrians, with solid skin that didn't glow, and only 5 fingers on each hand. But their movements were gentle, and they carried devices that sang with electronic harmony. Dr. Yunji was the first human to meet Elder Hana face to face. The xenobiologist had studied the translated Zephyrian prayers so carefully that she greeted the elder with the proper mathematical greeting song. "You learned our music," Hana said in amazement, speaking through the translation device. "Your prayers taught us," Dr. Yunji replied. "They were too beautiful not to learn." The evacuation began immediately. Human engineers worked alongside Zephyrian artists to carefully remove the most precious cultural artifacts from the crystal cities. Captain Daehyun personally supervised the loading of the Great Harmony Crystal, the sacred stone that had amplified Zephyrian songs for thousands of years. "Why are you doing this?" Elder Hana asked him as they stood in the ruins of her crystal city. "We are strangers to you. We have nothing to offer in return." Captain Daehyun looked up at the flickering, dying sun above them. "We've been alone in the darkness before," he said simply. "We know what it feels like to think no one cares. Today we're proof that someone does care." Not all of the Zephyrians chose to leave. Some of the eldest, led by ancient singer Kala, decided to remain with their dying world. "Our roots go deep into this soil," she explained to Hana. "We will sing the final song with our world." Hana wept as she said goodbye to those who stayed behind. They gathered in the cracked remains of the great resonance chamber, their voices rising in harmony one last time on their homeworld. As the human ships lifted off with their Zephyrian passengers, the rescued aliens pressed against the viewing ports to watch their world shrink below them. Many were crying, but they were also singing soft songs of gratitude and wonder. Commander Seojin reported from the tactical station, "All civilian ships are loaded and moving to safe distance. We're detecting massive stellar instability. The sun could go nova any minute." The combined fleet moved to what they hoped was a safe distance. Humans and Zephyrians stood together on the observation decks, watching the system where an ancient civilization had lived and loved for thousands of years. When their sun finally exploded in a brilliant flash of light, both species observed a moment of silence. Then slowly, the Zephyrians began to sing a farewell song for their lost world. The humans, who had learned some of their mathematical melodies, joined in as best they could. Dr. Yunji found herself crying as she listened to the combined voices. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," she whispered to Captain Daehyun. "It's the sound of hope," he replied. "The sound of prayers being answered." Elder Hana approached them, her translucent skin now glowing with patterns of gratitude, rather than grief. "You saved us," she said simply. "But more than that, you proved that the universe is not empty of kindness." As the fleet began its journey toward human space, carrying the survivors of Zephyria Prime to a new home among the stars, the songs of two species blended together in harmony, creating something more beautiful than either could have made alone. 6 months after the rescue, Elder Hana stood in the central plaza of New Zephyria, watching something she had never thought possible. Human and Zephyrian children played together among crystal spires that glowed with warm light under a new sun. The settlement had grown into something beautiful, part crystal city like the old Zephyria, part human architecture with its practical designs. The crystal buildings sang in harmony with electronic devices the humans had installed. Together, they created music that neither species could have made alone. It was different from the old songs, but Hana found it just as beautiful. Elder Hana, called young Kiro, now serving as a cultural liaison between the two species. "Captain Daehyun wants to show you something." Hana followed him to the communication center, where Captain Daehyun stood with Dr. Yunji and Lieutenant Minho. They were all looking at a display screen that showed star charts and signal patterns. "What is it?" Hana asked. "Another prayer," Minho said softly. "From a species called the Villani. Their planet is being destroyed by volcanic activity, and they don't have the technology to evacuate everyone." Dr. Yunji pointed to the translated message scrolling across the screen. "They're asking for help just like you did. Their signal is much weaker, and they're even farther away than Zephyria was. What will you do?" Hana asked, though she already knew the answer from the determined look in Captain Daehyun's eyes. "We go help them," he said simply. "But this time, we won't go alone." Within hours, word of the Villani distress signal had spread throughout New Zephyria and the human colonies. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Human ships volunteered for the rescue mission, but so did Zephyrian vessels. Beautiful crystal ships that had been modified with human technology to make them faster and more capable. "We want to help," Elder Hana told Captain Daehyun when he asked if the Zephyrians would join the mission. "You answered our prayers. Now we want to answer someone else's." The joint human Zephyrian rescue fleet was larger than the one that had saved Zephyria Prime. Word had spread to other species as well. Even some of the Sectar had sent ships, still confused by the concept of helping strangers but willing to try. Admiral Daehyun, promoted after the success of the Zephyrian rescue, stood before the assembled fleet commanders. Representatives from a dozen different species filled the briefing room, all united by a simple idea: that no one should face extinction alone. "The Villani have maybe 2 weeks before their planet becomes uninhabitable," he explained. "It's going to be difficult, dangerous, and expensive. No government is officially supporting this mission. We're here because we choose to be." Captain Yuna, Hana's former counselor who now commanded a Zephyrian vessel, raised her hand. "Admiral, my people have a saying. The universe sings best when all voices join the harmony. Today we add our voices to yours. The rescue mission to the Villani system was successful, but it was also just the beginning. More distress signals began arriving from across the galaxy, species facing natural disasters, wars, or simply abandonment by their neighbors. Each time, the growing alliance of rescue ships responded. They called it the Answered Prayer Protocol, and it spread from system to system. Species that had been saved became part of the network, adding their ships and knowledge to help others. The Zephyrians taught mathematical harmony and crystal technology. The humans provided tactical knowledge and engineering skills. The reformed Sektar offered protection and military escorts. Dr. Yunji, now director of xenological relations, kept track of all the species they had helped. 47 successful rescue missions in 8 months, she reported to the Alliance Council. We've saved over 2 million beings from extinction. And the cost? Asked a government representative who still didn't fully understand the program. The cost, replied Admiral Daehyun, is that we've proven the universe doesn't have to be a cold, empty place where everyone faces their problems alone. On New Zephyria, the cultural exchange between humans and Zephyrians had created amazing, new developments. Human children learned to sing in mathematical harmonies while young Zephyrians studied human poetry and music. Artists from both species worked together to create sculptures that combined crystal growth with metal engineering. Elder Hana had started a school where she taught the art of prayer singing to anyone who wanted to learn. Humans, Zephyrians, and refugees from other worlds. A prayer is just hope given voice, she would tell her students, and when enough voices join together, even the darkest void must listen. One evening, as the two suns of their new system set behind the crystal spires of New Zephyria, Hana sat with Captain, now Admiral Daehyun, on the same observation platform where she had once watched her old world die. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him. "Leaving your regular duties to chase signals in the dark?" Daehyun smiled as he watched human and Zephyrian families walking together through the plaza below. Children of both species were playing a game that involved singing mathematical puzzles while building crystal structures. "We spent so long wondering if we were alone in the universe," he said. "Now we know we're not alone, and more importantly, we know we don't have to let anyone else be alone either." The night sky above New Zephyria was filled with stars, and somewhere among them new prayers were being sent into the darkness. But now, those prayers had a better chance of being answered, because across the galaxy, species that had once been strangers were listening for each other's voices. The universe was still vast and often dangerous, but it was no longer empty of compassion. In crystal towers and metal cities, in the void between stars and on worlds both old and new, the message had spread. Someone is listening, someone cares, and no one has to sing alone in the darkness.